Okay, we're ready to go then. Good, thank you. Okay, well, good morning and welcome to Development Management Review Committee on the 14th of March. Have we got any apologies or substitutes?
Yes, Convener, an apology from Councillor Durnlow with Councillor Beattie substituting. Councillor Beattie has substituted throughout the whole of the consideration of this application for review. Also an apology from Councillor Fairweather. No substitute, Convener, as Councillor Fairweather was the member that started this process and can't be substituted at this late stage.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Mrs. Forsyth. Thank you. Okay, declarations of interest or declarations of transparency. I'm looking, Councillor Doran.
Thank you. Yes, I've raised this previously. It's a statement of transparency, just that I've been contacted by a group of people who had raised objections to this, and I was contacted before I was an elected member, and afterwards I've shared that contact with the team at Angus Council, and there's no reason why I can't participate in this meeting today.
Thank you. And Councillor Nicholl.
Statement of transparency. I know of the family. We're not friends, we're not relatives, we don't socialise, but it's very difficult to be a councillor and not know folk. Thank you.
Yes, exactly, Councillor Nicholl. And Councillor Brays.
Yes, I have a statement of transparency, and it's pretty much exactly the same as Councillor Nick family, but not to an extent where a member of the public might doubt my ability to make any decision in an unbiased manner.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brays. No other hands up. Okay, we'll now go on to item 3, which is land north east of Duntroon House, Duntroon, and the response to written procedure notice. And I'll hand over to Miss Leslie Tierney, who will go through that for us and give us a presentation.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, everybody. I'm Leslie Tierney, and I'm a Chartered Planning Consultant and Associate with McWilliam Architects, and I'm present today as the Independent Planning Advisor to the committee. I can confirm that I visited the site and surroundings on 24th of January this year. I've had no previous involvement in the application, and that I have no conflict of interest relative to the case, the applicant, or any interested party. So following deferral of the review at the Dmrc on the 8th of November 2022 for the site meeting, which took place on the 30th of January 2023, the review returned to Dmrc on 31st of January 2023, where it was again deferred to allow the Planning Authority to comment on the newly adopted National Planning Framework 4, and with particular regard to policies 1, 3 and 29, and then to allow the appellant to make further submissions in this regard. So for clarity, the papers before you include the appellant's notice of review and grounds of appeal, further letters of representation, and the appellant's response to these. And since the deferral at the last meeting, the Planning Authority's statement on NPF 4 and the appellant's response to this. So turning to the Planning Authority's response, while 3 specific policies were outlined for further comment, a number of NPF 4 policies are applicable, which are Sustainable Places Policies 1, tackling the climate and nature crisis, 2, climate mitigation and adaptation, 3, biodiversity, 4, natural places, 5, soils, 6, forestry, woodland and trees, 7, historic assets and places, 9, brownfield, vacant and derelict land and buildings, and 13, sustainable transport. Livable places policies 14 on design, quality and place, 18 on infrastructure first, 22 on flood risk and water management, and 23 on health and safety. And productive places policy 29 on rural development. So looking at the policies 1, 3 and 29, Policy 1 concerns the weight to be given to the global nature and climate crisis. Policy 13 concerns sustainable transport, the intent of which is to encourage, promote and facilitate developments which prioritise walking, wheeling, cycling and public transport for everyday travel and reduce the need to travel unsustainably, and that development proposals for significant travel generating uses will not be supported in locations which would increase reliance on the private car, taking into account the specific characteristics of the area. Policy 29 seeks to ensure that rural places are vibrant and sustainable and that rural communities and businesses are supported. Proposals will be supported that contribute to the viability, sustainability and diversity of rural communities and the local rural economy where they are cited to be in keeping with the character of the area and where the transport needs of the development as appropriate to the rural location are taken into account. The Planning Authority concludes that the location is not consistent with the overarching aims of MPF4 because it is on a greenfield site out with a major city, will be predominantly accessed by car and thus does not minimise greenhouse gas emissions, and that it is contrary to MPF4 for 3 reasons. 1, with regard to policies 3, 14 and 29, the development would generate significant vehicle movements, which is not accessible by a choice of transport modes and would increase reliance on the private car. 2, with regard to policies 5 and 9, the proposal is contrary to the spatial principle of compact urban growth and limiting urban expansion because the development is on greenfield land and disturbed soils. And 3, with regard to policies 1 and 2, the development would generate significant vehicle movements in a location not accessible by a choice of sustainable transport modes, would increase reliance on the private car, is not cited to minimise greenhouse gas emissions, and is not consistent with the need to address the global climate and nature crisis. Turning to the appellant's response, this states that the Planning Authority's assessment of the application as a significant traffic generating development is incorrect and has pointed out that this is a matter which the Council's Roads Department disagree with, and at the last meeting of the Dmrc, I also highlighted this point to you. With regard to Policy 1, it is noted that this is an overarching policy which requires significant weight to be given to the global climate and nature crisis, but that this does not mean that development in rural areas on greenfield sites cannot take place. With regard to Policy 13, the appellant makes the point that attending a cremation cannot be considered to be everyday travel as specified in the policy, and that this reduces the applicability of the policy to the development. The appellant also reiterates that the proposed extension of the bus service providing electric vehicles and dropping points and improvements to the public road network are consistent with Policy 13. With regard to Policy 29, the appellant seeks to point out that what requires to be taken into account is whether the transport needs of the development have been taken into account as appropriate for a rural location, and that the policy makes no reference to a breach occurring if a development generates significant traffic. It concludes by stating that the proposal will not lead to additional traffic, rather displaced traffic travelling to cremations in Angus. In terms of other MPF4 policies, and the appellant's response, while there is agreement with the Planning Authority that policies 3, 4, 6, 7, 18, 22 and 23 are not breached, in terms of policy 14 on design, quality and place, the application was not refused on design grounds. The appellant has explained the requirement for a rural location and the development is sensitively designed. The appellant goes on to say that it is a flawed assessment to say that the development does not comply with Policy 5 because of the valued soils protected by this policy, because none of the valued soils, protected by this policy will be affected. The appellant states that there is no breach of Policy 9, as this directs us to LDP policy, which permits development on non-allocated greenfield land. The appellant also states that Policy 2 is not breached because the proposal will minimise emissions through thermal performance, heat recovery, recycling and electric charging, amongst other features. It is further noted that there are no specific policies governing crematoriums, that the development will generate rural employment and provide a necessary service for the community, that policies are supportive of development that help to eliminate discrimination and promote equality, particularly tackling social, economic and health inequalities, and that actively enabling rural development is seen as key in achieving rural revitalisation, which is a key target of the National Spatial Strategy in NPF 4. So although much of this is acknowledged by the Planning Authority, the appellant points out that Policy 25 is also relevant, which concerns community wealth building, which it is contended should carry significant weight, and that the inequality and different life chances depending on where you live lie at the heart of the proposed development. So finally, the appellant refers to an article in the Times newspaper on the 11th of February this year about the cost of funerals, and which specifically notes Freecombe as amongst the highest cremation fees. So to draw all this together in some kind of conclusion for you, both myself and your roads officer would not consider the proposal to be a significant travel generating use. However, one of the key messages in NPF 4 is that it is for the decision maker to decide what weight to be attached to various policies and considerations, and has been highlighted to you this morning. There are a number of other policy and material considerations which should be taken into account. So I would conclude by highlighting that the decision must take into account the local development plan, NPF 4 and other material considerations which have all been highlighted to you, and the DMRC must decide the weight to be attached to all policies and considerations in reaching a decision. So thank you, convener. If you would like me to run through the slides again, that show the photographs of the site, notwithstanding the fact obviously there was a site visit, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed, Ms. Tierney. Thanks for that description of the impact of NPF 4. Elected members, I'm conscious it is a little bit of time since we did the site visit. What's the view? Do you want to see the slides again?
For completeness,
Yes.
convener, I think we should.
Yeah, I would agree with this. This has been a long journey, and I think we just, for completeness, I think if we could see the slides again, that would certainly be helpful.
We're just sharing that for you, convener.
That person. The members just confirm if they can see that on screen.
Clear to me, yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Lost it a bit, but that's done there.
Okay, so as your committee today seeks review of refusal of planning permission application reference 20/00830/FULL for erection of a crematorium building, associated parking, access, turning space, landscaping and boundary enclosures. This is the context plan. The application site is just short of 2 hectares, 1.99 hectares, on the southernmost part of an agricultural field located north of the C4 public road and around 300 metres northeast of Duntroon House. The larger field is contained by woodland and the public road with existing trees along the southern boundary of the road. This is the site plan. The application site is bounded by a woodland area, Duntroon Hill to the west, a woodland strip to the east with an access track and 2 houses beyond. The third house is located further to the north, and that's accessed from the same track there to the east. To the south is the public road with mature trees along its edge, and the balance of the agricultural field lies to the north against a woodland backdrop. This is the building and external works plan, which shows that the building would be positioned to the southwest part of the site orientated on an east-west axis with parking and circulation to the east of the building. Access would be taken from a new junction formed with the C4 public road to the south, leading to parking provision for 127 cars with 7 disabled spaces and space for coaches to wait and staff parking. A planted garden and memorial garden is included to the front and south of the building, incorporating grassed areas, memorials and flower and shrub beds. And the south boundary would be formed to the north, the site boundary would be formed to the north by a post and wire fence, a new feature dry stone wall with posts and entrance gates formed at the southern boundary, with new tree and hedge planting across the site, particularly concentrated towards the southeast corner. These are some site sections which show the building in the slope down towards the bottom part of the site there. These are some of the proposed elevations and the ground floor plan. Building measuring 544 square metres, single storey, pitched roof to about 8 metres high to the ridge, entrance hall and reception to the front or east, with the main hall directly behind, accommodating seating for 120 people. The cremator and servicing are to the rear or west, with the stack on the rear roof section terminating at around 9 metres from ground level. The offices and administrative areas are to the north and the public exit to the south. The building is described as reflecting a traditional, simple agricultural form with natural slate roof and grey and timber-clad elevations. There's mitigation proposed on the surrounding road network, including widening of the C4 along the site frontage, passing places on the C4 and U315 roads, crematorium signage to direct traffic from the B978 Killis Road, and improvements to visibility displays. And then these are just some of the photographs that have been taken of the site. These are not necessarily the same numbering as councillors had at the site meeting, but I have it down as, this is the 7th slide you have here. This is the site from the public road, looking towards the application site. Again, this is the public road frontage at the southern boundary of the site, with views of that to the east and west. Again, here are the junction locations. As I say, these don't accord with what you saw on the site visit day, but for the purpose of the presentation today, we have firstly junction 1, which is the C4 West Hall, C4 and U315 junction, with a view towards the north of the site, view north to the site in the distance there. And again, same junction of the C4 and the U315 with a view south towards the B978. We'll then come to junction location 2, which is the C4 and the B978 junction with a view south towards Dundee. And then at the same junction, viewing north towards Kellis. Junction location 3, shown here, which is the junction of the U315 with the B978, with the view south at that junction towards Dundee. And then again to the north towards Kellis. Then coming back to junction location 4, which is the junction of the C6 and the C4, west towards Burnside of Duntroon. And the same junction again, east, leading towards the application site. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, I'm getting an echo, so if you could maybe silence your microphones, that would be good. Any questions for our planning advisor? I've got Ms. Magson with a hand up who was going to, do you want to come in at this point with the legal advice, Tina?
If there's any questions, that probably would be best to be done first, convener, and I'll come in after that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay, so any questions for Ms. Tierney on that presentation? I don't see any. Okay. Okay, Ms. Maxson, over to you.
Just very brief advice to members today. For clarity, members, in terms of the recommendations that are before you today, members are to consider report 369 of 22, and consideration of that report must be considered in full, and that's to include the further lodged representations in Appendix 3 and also the applicant's response at Appendix 4, in addition to the whole of the planning authority's case and the applicant's case. And lastly, just a reminder that if you feel able to determine without further procedure at this stage today, in terms of Regulation 12, your decision must be supported by complete, precise and relevant reasons, Convener.
Okay, thank you. So really just to confirm, we've got to look at both the one that was previously submitted, the very lengthy report, and the most recent one. I think that's would be my summary. And if we want to go against the planning advice, we need to have reasons for that and comprehensive reasons. So I'm opening up really to say, are there any other questions to any other officers? We've obviously had a chance to ask planning. We've had a planning description. Are there any other questions to officers on this particular application? Right, I'm not seeing any hands at all. Okay. Okay, so do elected members now have sufficient information to determine the planning application or the appeal?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're seeing nodding of hands. Okay, nodding of heads. Okay, well, in the usual fashion, we'll just go round the committee first to get members' views, and I'll turn first to the Vice Convener, Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, Convener. Colleagues, I would recommend that we approve this much-needed facility in Angus. My reasons are as follows. Crematoriums need an appropriate and sensitive setting, given the sensitivity and respect to loved ones who have been lost. The report of handling acknowledges the type of use is unlikely to be near a town centre or edge centre location. In the Cremation Act of 1902, repealed 2019, states there's a recognition that new crematoria will be built in a countryside location close to an urban fringe, preferably not in a brownfield site due to contamination, and not all locations can be served by public transport. The NPF 4 Policy 1 gives sufficient weight to be given to global climate and nature crisis. This does not mean that the development in a rural location and greenfield sites should not take place. The policy is to encourage, promote and facilitate developments and address the climate emergency. On the 1st of February 2023, new building standards came into force, and revised standards are the most stringent yet for energy performance, CO2 emissions, overheating, ventilation, and the applicant has stated the development will reduce by various means the emissions. This would comply with NPF 4 Policy 1. The site extends to 1.98 hectares, which is mostly class 3.2 and some 3.1, and not classed as prime agricultural ground. The field is difficult to farm due to the slope and has been set aside for approximately 4 years. The site will incorporate an internal one-way road as required by the Council Road Service, and there will be 127 car parking spaces provided, plus 7 which will be disabled spaces, and spaces for coaches to pull up and park. There are no significant amenity issues in response of air quality, noise, light pollution, odour, or loss of privacy to residential property that could not be mitigated by the planning conditions. The development therefore would comply with LDP Policy DS4 and NPF 4 Policy 1. SEBA has absolutely no objections to the proposal and will be responsible for granting a licence for the operation of the facility, which will control emissions. The siting and the proposed development would not give rise to any significant design or landscape issues and planning conditions. So the proposed development complies with LDP policy DS3 and PV6. The proposed development is designed to minimise the loss of agricultural land, which is a comprehensively small area of non-prime agricultural land, and would ensure compliance with LDP policy PV20. There are no protected species or habitats present on the site and would comply with LDP policy PV5 on protected species. The existing woodland to the north and west would not be affected, and the new planting would enhance the biodiversity contained within the site. This would comply with LDP policy PV7 and the NPF4 policy 1 on woodland trees and hedges. The site is not subject to any building or cultural heritage designation and complies with LDP policy PV8. The council road services are satisfied that the traffic from the development can be accommodated within the local road network. Also, the independent planning advisor said at the Dmrc meeting on the 31st of January that the development would not generate a complying with LDP policy DS4. NPF4 policy 13 is to promote walking, cycling and public transport for everyday use. A cremation cannot be considered as an everyday travel, therefore no justification for the above policy. The NPF4 policy 25 supports development proposals which contribute to the local and regional wealth building, which can improve community resilience, reducing inequalities and creating new local firms and jobs, which this application does. There will be no risk of flooding, and the proposal can be connected to the public water supply and served by private treatment system for foul drains. This complies with LDP policy PV12 and PV15, and SEBA has no objections whatsoever. NPF4 policy 29. The application is an essential community service and designed to minimise greenhouse gases and also generate employment. Explore Dundee has indicated they are willing to facilitate a bus stop on site, along with the roadworks, electric car charging points, and electric bus pickup for mourners. The application satisfies policy 29. The LDP policy DS1 and NPF4 policy 9 permits development out with the settlement boundary where there are a scale and a nature appropriate to their location when they are in accordance with the relevant policies and plans. The development of a greenfield site will be supported when there are no suitable and available brownfield sites capable of accommodating this development. It complies with LDP policy DS1 and NPF4 policy 9. The application for a crematorium is of a type of use unsuitable for town centre or edge of urban locations. This is accepted by officers in the report and complies with LDP policy DS2. The LDP policy DS3 requires development to deliver a high design standard. This project complies with the LDP policy DS3. The LDP policy TC8 requires new community facilities to be accessible and of an appropriate standard. The officers have no issues with this project complies, so LDP policy TC8 if I may, I would like to further support. There is a real need for this crematorium, which would have economical and social benefits for the whole of Angus and its community, and would significantly help with funeral poverty. It is not suitable for the town edge or urban locations, and there are no preferable sites available. The proposed application site is accessible by various modes of transport appropriate to the scale of the development. There are no policies in either NPF4 or the ALDP which deal specifically with applications for crematorium developments. And this application does not breach any of the NPF4 policies. Therefore, I uphold and fully support this appeal. Thank you. That's me.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nicholl. That was a comprehensive statement. Thank you. Can I move on to Councillor Braze for your views?
Yes, thanks, Convener. My views are concur entirely with Councillor Nichols, and he's given a very comprehensive account of his reasoning, and I would support that fully. Further, I would say that NPF4 is not there to be used to stick rigidly to the idea that we can only have development where there's existing good public transport and cycling or cycling and walking routes, because to do so would prevent development in 90% of rural Angus. I can think of many community halls that would not be built now should they burn down or something like that. They wouldn't be able to be built and reused if we were to stick rigidly to the idea that we can only have facilities that will be used by the public adjacent to bus routes and safe cycling and walking routes. So for that reason and all the reasons that Councillor Nicholl has said, I concur with him, and I would like to uphold the appellant's case and grant permission.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Braze. I'll move on to Councillor Doran.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that this appeal should be made for the reasons noted by officers. And I think this is because this is looking at infrastructure for the future, and particularly around the site location. Although the build itself is including mitigations against gas emissions and is sustainable, the fact that the site location isn't close to main transport links or routes in Angus is a difficult one. NPF4 places increased emphasis on locating new developments in locations which have good access for sustainable travel options and avoiding increased reliance on the private car. And the officers note that while the site is in a countryside location, it's likely to predominantly serve an urban area where access would be reliant on a private car. It's noted that there is potential for a bus stop and a bus route. Unfortunately, two of the bus routes that are mentioned within that application, the subsidy have just ended for, so it's reducing further the public transport options that are available in those areas. And so for the reasons outlined by the officers, I think this appeal should be rejected.
Okay, thanks very much. And finally, Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Convener. I'm in agreement with Councillor Nicholl and Councillor Braze on this. I think, when you look at NPF4 policies 1, 2 and 13, yes, I mean, we want to sort of reduce emissions. We want to reduce the reliance on the family car. However, we live in Angus, it's rural. We are not served well by public transport, and the reality is for this, travel that is not everyday travel, we need family cars. Well, we need the car for that. As far as biodiversity, natural places, woodlands and trees, as for the policies relating to that. Crematoria are actually very good. This crematorium looks like it's going to be very good for that sort of thing. So I'm quite happy with that, and I'm quite happy to support that. And as far as the design and how it fits into the space, again, I think this is a good fit into the space. I don't think a crematorium is very good if you put it on the edge of an industrial development. Just from a personal point of view, I would not like my sort of thoughts of the last time I interact with a friend or family member who's died is to be standing in an industrial site. This is a much better location for that. So as far as I'm concerned, I think I understand where the policies of NPR4 are coming from, but I don't think that this is a good description of where those policies should be enacted. So I would approve the site.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Beattie. I'll now give you my views, and if Councillor Nicholl gave a very comprehensive description. I may cross over on him in some points, but yes, I agree with Councillor Nicholl, Brays and Beattie. If I can start by starting with the reasons for refusal, the lack of active travel, which is the essential reason for rejection, means travelling to the Duntroon site. I think to a cremation needs to be examined against what I call a common sense test. And I hate the phrase, but I'm going to use it, the lived experience test. Firstly, very few people, in my experience, travel to funerals by public transport. It may be feasible in large cities with excellent, frequent public transport links. However, as other members have meant, in rural Angus, our public transport is extremely poor, and the frequency of service mitigates against using a bus to travel to and from a funeral service. Nobody wants to get to a funeral service 55 minutes before the service starts, and nobody wants to wait 55 minutes for the pickup bus after it ends. So there's a practical issue there. I would find it very hard to find any location in Angus that would pass this active travel test. The days when funerals were carried out in town centres and cemeteries were central in towns, allowing attendees to walk from their homes, has long since gone. The very objections majored on the road situation near to Duntroon, and we've received no objection from the Council's road service. On the site visit on the 30th of January, we examined the site and 5 nearby junctions with a roads officer, Mr. Barnes. While in common with much of Angus roads, the junctions are not all of modern standards. We believe that with suitable signage and mitigation, they will be satisfactory. The review of road staff is that the funeral traffic will mostly fall outside of the rush hour and will not increase the traffic volumes in the area significantly. I would say that approval is supported by several material considerations. The 2016 local development plan did not consider increased capacity for cremation facilities, despite a huge increase in cremation over the past 60 years. Cemetery capacity was discussed, but that now comprises a diminishing proportion of funerals. I do not believe the 2016 development plan affords any suitable areas where a crematoria could be erected in any Angus town. I also note there is no policy in NPF4 which deals specifically with applications for crematoria developments. Secondly, the very high cost of cremations in the Dundee Angus area. This may lead to funeral poverty. Increased competition may drive down the excessive prices in our area, contributing to a reduction in inequalities. I think that's picked up under NPF 4 policy 25. The delay in finding funeral slots in the respective crematoria facilities at the present, which means significant waiting for families before a service can be arranged, and that is distressing for the bereaved. 4. Crematoria have been recently approved by Aberdeenshire and Fife councils in similar rural locations. I think I note as well that the Fife facility is significantly cheaper than previous facilities. Number 5, the difficulty of finding a suitable location within any Angus town, close to suitable transport links that would satisfy the active travel criteria. If I can turn back to the cemetery situation, I doubt if the majority of our cemeteries would pass the active travel test now, because they tend to be at extremities of our towns and they're not well served by public transport. Sixthly, economic benefit, income and employment gain for Angus. Number 7, the MPF4 documents have been read, and I think, reflecting the comment that's been made before, would only have had relevance to a development where regular journeys would be made, such as to a football ground or a supermarket. Attending a funeral is not a frequent travel event. Funeral traffic would play an insignificant contribution to an annual car owner's journey, and removing that type of travel would play very little impact in reducing car journeys by 20%, which is the government target. Policy 3025 of MPF4 references improved community resilience and reducing inequalities, and high funeral costs in a low-wage area such as Dundee and Angus is a significant factor. I also note that there are no technical objections from the Roads Department, Environmental Health, SEPA, and none from Dundee City Council. So that's my feeling on the matter. I think, Mrs. Forsyth, if we can move to the formal part of the meeting, and I'm quite happy to propose that we uphold the appeal for the reasons I have documented, with the addition to the comments made previously by Councillor Nicholl, which were fairly extensive. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, it's seconded by Councillor Nicholl. Do we have a counter proposal? Councillor Doran.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to put forward that we reject this appeal.
And do you have a seconder?
I suspect I do not have a seconder for this one. But,
okay, just keep me right here, Mrs. Forsyth. We don't have a valid amendment, so I take it that the matter is decided on the fact that there is a proposer and seconder and no seconder for any amendment.
That's correct, convener. The amendment falls as Councillor Doran has no seconder, so the appeal is upheld for the reasons as indicated by yourself, with Councillor Nicholl's reasons as well.
Okay.
That, of course, will be subject to conditions to be submitted to a future meeting for consideration.
So we don't have any conditions at the moment available?
No, there's no conditions at this stage, convener. They would need to be brought back to a future meeting. Okay,
thanks very much indeed. So just to clarify that the appeal has been upheld, and that relates to planning application 20/00830/ full, and that relates to report 369/22 and 93/23. I'd like to conclude just by thanking all the council staff in this application. The workload has been huge due to the volumes of papers and the large number of public comments. I'd also like to thank elected members who've been tasked with reading the lengthy reports, which are certainly the longest I've seen in almost 11 years as a councillor. There have been significant delays in hearing this appeal for a variety of reasons. It's no secret our planning service is severely understaffed. This is due to a national shortage of suitably qualified candidates. I can only apologise on behalf of Angus Council for the many delays in reaching today's decision. I'd like to especially thank Mrs. Sarah Forsyth, the clerk to Dmrc, for her hard work and support to the committee over this protracted period. That concludes today's business, and I wish you a good day.
Thanks, convener.
Thank you.
Thank you.